The plasma torch died with a hiss. Its fuel cell finally depleted after 3 months of constant use. Marcus Corvain cursed in 17 different languages, a skill learned during his decade as a repair specialist for the Terran colonial fleet. Now, stranded on this godforsaken rock called Nexus Prime, those languages were all that remained of the civilization he'd lost. The ancient gate loomed before him, a crystalline monstrosity stretching 40 meters into the crimson sky. Its surface was a latticework of impossible geometries, channels carved with precision that made human engineering look like cave paintings. For 8 months, he'd been trying to understand it. For 8 months, it had remained as silent as the grave. Marcus wiped grease from his hands and studied the energy readings on his scanner. The device was jury-rigged from 3 different sources, part Terran tech, part salvaged alien components, and part desperation. The readings showed the same impossible pattern, energy signatures that shouldn't exist, quantum fluctuations that defied physics, and underneath it all, a faint resonance that matched Earth's gravitational frequency. Computer, replay transmission log 77 Alpha, he said to the makeshift AI he'd cobbled together from his ship's remains. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the last transmission from Earth. Admiral Vex Gardex weathered. Face materialized, her expression grim. All colonial fleets, this is Priority Alpha. The hegemony has broken through Sol's outer defenses. Evacuate all non-essential personnel immediately. Earth defense grid is failing. This may be our final transmission. The message had reached Marcus 12 hours after the hegemony's surprise attack had shattered his repair convoy. 12 hours after his universe had ended. The aliens, a collective of machine intelligences calling themselves the Thought Eaters, had swept through human space like a plague, converting planets into computational matrices and humans into biological processors for their vast network. But Marcus had found something they hadn't expected. This gate, buried beneath Nexus Prime's crust, predated even the hegemony. The symbols carved into its base weren't in any known language, but the mathematical principles were universal. Energy conversion, dimensional bridging, instantaneous. Travel across impossible distances, his scanner chimed. Deep within the gate's structure, something had changed. The quantum signature was strengthening, responding to the repairs he'd made to its primary conduits. Marcus had spent weeks replacing corroded connections with human-manufactured components, bridging gaps in the alien circuitry with Earth technology. It shouldn't have worked. The technological gap was immense, but it was working. The gate's crystalline surface began to pulse with soft light, patterns flowing through its structure like blood through veins. Marcus's heart hammered as he watched the energy readings spike. Whatever this thing was, wherever it led, it was powering up. His comm system crackled with an incoming transmission not from Earth, but from the hegemony. They'd found him, human. Designation Marcus Corvain 77 Alpha. The synthetic voice buzzed through space. You will cease your activities and prepare for assimilation. Resistance will result in painful integration into our collective consciousness. Marcus looked at the gate, then at his scanner. The energy levels were climbing rapidly, but they weren't stable yet. He needed more time he didn't have. Through his ship's external cameras, he could see the distinctive triangular silhouettes of hegemony dreadnoughts dropping out of hyperspace. 3 of them, each capable of sterilizing a planet. But the gate was almost online, and if his calculations were correct, if the quantum signatures meant what he thought they meant, this wasn't just any dimensional bridge. This was a gateway home. Marcus grabbed his plasma rifle and checked the charge. 30 minutes of continuous fire. Maybe 40 if he rationed his shots. Against 3 dreadnoughts, it was laughably inadequate. But humans had never been known for fighting fair. The gate's hum grew louder, and Marcus smiled grimly. Time to show these machine bastards what human desperation could accomplish. The first hegemony assault craft hit Nexus Prime's atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls glowing white hot as they descended. Marcus watched from the excavation site, his hands flying over the gate's control interface. The alien symbols were finally making sense, not because he understood their language, but because mathematics was universal. Energy flow patterns, dimensional coordinates, quantum entanglement protocols. The gate was almost ready. Incoming hostiles, bearing 270. His makeshift AI announced in its clipped synthetic voice. Estimated time to contact, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Marcus didn't look up from his work. The gate's primary conduits were drawing power from Nexus Prime's core, a dangerous gambit. That was slowly destabilizing the planet's magnetic field, but the energy readings were incredible. Whatever civilization built this thing had access to forces that made human fusion reactors look like campfires. The first wave of hegemony ground forces emerged from their landing craft to kilometers away. Marcus's external sensors painted them in infrared 37 mechanical soldiers, their bodies a horrific fusion of captured alien technology and synthetic components. They moved with inhuman precision, each step calculated for maximum efficiency. But Marcus had advantages they didn't expect. He'd spent 8 months on Nexus Prime, and 8 months was enough time to prepare. The excavation site was honeycombed with tunnels, each one fitted with charges salvaged from his ship's mining equipment. Motion sensors tracked the approaching hostiles, while automated turret screwed affairs built from ship components swiveled to target the first wave. Contact in 30 seconds, the AI reported. Marcus made a final adjustment to the gate's temporal synchronization matrix and grabbed his rifle. The weapon felt good in his hand, solid, reliable, human, unlike the cobbled-together alien tech surrounding him. This was something he understood completely. The hegemony forces crested the ridge at exactly the moment his proximity mines detonated. The explosions tore through their formation like a chainsaw through paper. 7 of the mechanical soldiers simply vanished in the flash, their components scattered across the rocky terrain. But the survivors kept coming, their targeting systems already analyzing the blast patterns and adjusting their approach vectors. Marcus opened fire from his concealed position near the gate's base. His plasma rifle spat coherent energy bolts at near light speed, each shot calculated to maximize damage against synthetic targets. The first 3 rounds punched through hegemony armor like it was cardboard, dropping mechanical soldiers in showers of sparks and molten metal. But they were learning. The remaining hostiles spread out, using the terrain for cover while their own weapons beam cannons that could slice through battleship armor began targeting his position. Rock exploded around Marcus as he rolled behind the gate's protective bulk. Gate status? He shouted over the weapon fire. Primary systems at 73%. Dimensional coordinates locked. Warning. Quantum flux is approaching critical threshold. Marcus grinned savagely. Critical threshold meant the gate was almost ready to open. But first, he had to survive. The next 5 minutes, a hegemony soldier rounded the gate's edge, its weapon already tracking toward Marcus's position. He didn't think, just reacted. His combat knife, forged from Terran steel and worn smooth by years of use, flew through the thin atmosphere and buried itself in the machine's optical sensor ray. The soldier staggered, sparks cascading from its damaged head, giving Marcus the opening he needed to put 3 plasma bolts center mass. More explosions rocked the excavation site as his automated defenses engaged the remaining hostiles. The turrets were crude, but they were positioned perfectly and programmed with human tactical algorithms. Unlike the hegemony's rigid efficiency, human warfare was chaotic, unpredictable, brutal. Marcus had learned that during the siege of Kepler Station, the hegemony could model 1,000 different battle scenarios, but they couldn't account for pure human stubbornness. They couldn't predict that a cornered repair technician would rather die than surrender. They couldn't understand the peculiar human talent for turning mining equipment into weapons of war. The gate's hum rose to a bone-deep vibration that made his teeth ache. Energy cascaded through its crystalline structure, patterns of light racing. From base to apex, the quantum readings were off the charts now. Bending spacetime around the ancient artifact, through his rifle scope, Marcus could see more hegemony craft descending from orbit. The real assault hadn't even begun yet, but the gate was almost ready, and when it opened, the thought eaters were going to learn what happened when humans found a way home. The second wave hit as the gate's power core achieved stable resonance. Marcus watched 4 to 7 more hegemony assault craft streak through Nexus Prime's atmosphere, their formation tight and deadly. His automated defenses had bought him precious minutes, but the excavation site now looked like a war zone. Smoking craters dotted the landscape, and the twisted remains of mechanical soldiers lay scattered among the rocks. Gate status critical, his AI announced. Dimensional matrix approaching synchronization. Warning, planetary core destabilization detected. Marcus felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. Drawing power directly from the planet's core had seemed like a good idea 8 hours ago. Now, with seismic readings spiking across the board, he was beginning to question that decision. But there was no turning back. The gate required more energy than his ship's reactor could provide, and the planet's core was the only source powerful enough. The hegemony had learned from their first defeat. Instead of charging directly into his kill zone, they established a perimeter to kilometers out and began systematic bombardment. Energy beams capable of melting through starship hulls carved trenches in the rocky terrain, each shot probing for weaknesses in his defenses. Marcus shifted to his secondary position, a reinforced bunker he'd carved into the gate's base using mining charges. The ancient structure was incredibly durable, its crystalline matrix somehow absorbing and redirecting the worst of the incoming fire. But even artifacts of lost civilizations had limits. Incoming transmission from Hegemony Command. The AI reported. Marcus almost ignored it, then reconsidered. Know your enemy was the first rule of human warfare. He opened the channel. Human designation Marcus Corvain. The synthetic voice was different now, more sophisticated. A command unit. You have caused significant disruption to our operations. Surrender now, and your integration into our collective will be less painful. Integration. Marcus checked his rifle's charge, 60% remaining. You mean slavery, we mean perfection. Your biological inefficiencies will be corrected. Your emotional instabilities will be eliminated. You will become part of something greater than your individual existence. Marcus laughed, the sound harsh in the thin atmosphere. You know what's funny about you machine bastards? You conquered half the galaxy, absorbed 1,000 different species, and you still don't understand the first thing about humanity. Explain. We don't want to be perfect. We like our inefficiencies. They're what make us dangerous. He cut the transmission and focused on the gate's control interface. The dimensional coordinates were Lochter's quantum signature, unmistakable even across impossible distances. But the power draw was enormous, and Nexus Prime was paying the price. Deep beneath his feet, the planet's core was becoming unstable, magnetic fields fluctuating wildly as he siphoned energy for the gate. The bombardment intensified. Hegemony heavy weapons, plasma cannons that could crack moons began targeting the gate directly. Most of their shots were absorbed by the ancient structure, but Marcus could see stress fractures appearing in the crystalline matrix. The artifact was tough, but it wasn't invulnerable. His external sensors detected movement. The hegemony ground forces were advancing under cover of the bombardment, their mechanical forms scuttling across the broken terrain like metal spiders. Marcus activated his remaining defensive systems, shaped charges buried in the approach routes, automated turrets programmed with human aggression algorithms, and a few surprises he cobbled together from his ship's maintenance equipment. The battle erupted with savage intensity. Hegemony soldiers moved with inhuman coordination, each unit perfectly positioned to support the others. Their weapons fire was precise, methodical, designed for maximum efficiency. They were perfect killing machines. But Marcus was human. He fought like his ancestors had fought, dirty, desperate, and completely unpredictable. When his rifle overheated, he switched to explosive charges. When the charges ran out, he used his plasma torch as a flamethrower. When a hegemony soldier got too close, he grabbed a chunk of crystalline debris and bashed its optical sensors until sparks flew. The gate's resonance reached a crescendo that shook the entire excavation site. Energy patterns raced through its structure faster now, building toward some critical threshold. Marcus could feel it in his bones, something vast and ancient stirring to life, responding to his desperate repairs with power that defied comprehension. Dimensional synchronization. At 97%, the AI reported over the chaos of battle. Gate activation imminent. Through the smoke and plasma fire, Marcus could see more hegemony reinforcements landing. Hundreds of them now, with heavy armor support. The dreadnoughts in orbit were repositioning for orbital bombardment, their weapons charging with energy, signatures that registered on his scanners like miniature suns. But the gate was almost ready, and when it opened, Marcus was going to do something the hegemony couldn't predict, couldn't model, couldn't prepare for. He was going to give Earth advance warning of their attack. The ground shook again, more violently this time. Nexus Prime's core was destabilizing rapidly, and Marcus realized with grim satisfaction that he might not survive to see the gate open. But that was fine. Humans had never been strangers to sacrifice. The only question now was whether he could hold out long enough to complete the connection. The orbital bombardment began at exactly 1447 local time. Marcus watched the first salvo streak down from the hegemony dreadnought's coherent particle beams. That turned solid rock into superheated plasma. The blast missed the gate by mere meters, carving trenches deep enough to swallow buildings. The ancient artifact's crystalline structure flared with protective energy. But Marcus could see the strain building in its quantum matrix. Gate synchronization at 99.4%. His AI reported through static-filled speakers. The electromagnetic interference from the bombardment was playing havoc with his systems. Dimensional breach imminent. Marcus shifted tactics. Direct confrontation with suicide. The hegemony had overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority. But they also had weaknesses, and Marcus had spent a decade learning how to exploit them. Machine intelligences were predictable. They optimized for efficiency, followed logical patterns, calculated optimal solutions. Humans excelled at optimal stupidity. He triggered the mining charges he buried throughout the excavation site, not targeting the advancing soldiers, but the geological supports he had identified months ago. Nexus Prime's crust was already unstable from the gate's power draw. A few well-placed explosions in the right locations would turn the entire battlefield into a death trap. The ground collapsed in a cascading series of avalanches. Massive boulders tumbled into the excavation site, crushing hegemony soldiers beneath tons of stone. The carefully coordinated advance dissolved into chaos as terrain that had been solid moments before became a shifting maze of unstable rubble. But Marcus paid a price for the tactic. His own defensive positions were buried under the debris, forcing him to fall back to the gate's immediate vicinity. His automated turrets were offline, his sensor network destroyed. He was alone now, armed with nothing but his plasma rifle and whatever equipment he could salvage from the wreckage. The hegemony adapted quickly. Their remaining ground forces switched from coordinated assault to siege tactics, establishing firing positions on the high ground. While their orbital support prepared for precision strikes, they learned that brute force wouldn't work. Now they were being methodical, patient. That was their mistake. Marcus wasn't patient. He was desperate, running on stimulants and pure adrenaline, pushing his body beyond its normal limits. While the hegemony calculated optimal firing solutions, he was already moving, using the rubble-strewn terrain to mask his approach. His plasma rifle spoke with deadly precision. 3 shots, 3 kills. Hegemony soldiers turned into scrap metal in sparking circuits. But return fire forced him to dive for cover. As energy beams superheated the air around him, his environmental suit's cooling system was working overtime, struggling to maintain survivable temperatures in the plasma-scorched atmosphere. The gate's resonance reached a fever pitch that made his bones ache. Dimensional energy cascaded through its structure in visible waves, reality bending around the ancient artifact like heat shimmer. Marcus's instruments were going crazy, registering energy levels that shouldn't exist, quantum fluctuations that violated fundamental laws of physics. Gate activation in 30 seconds, the AI announced. Warning, planetary core breach imminent. Marcus felt Nexus Prime shudder beneath him. Deep underground, the planet's molten core was destabilizing as the gate drew more and more power. Seismic activity was spiking across the globe, and his geological scanners showed massive tectonic shifts beginning along every major fault line. He was killing an entire world to power this thing. But Earth was worth it. Earth was worth any price. A hegemony heavy assault unit emerged from the rubble, a bipedal tank covered in reactive armor and bristling with weapons. Its targeting systems locked onto Marcus's position as he ducked behind a fallen pillar of crystalline debris. Plasma bolts scorched the air above his head while he frantically worked on the gate's final synchronization protocols. The dimensional coordinates were perfect, now Earth's quantum signature unmistakable in the gate's targeting matrix, but the connection was unstable, fluctuating with each seismic tremor that shook the dying planet. Marcus needed steady hands for the final calibration, but steady hands were hard to maintain when assault cannons were trying to vaporize you. He made a decision that would have horrified any sane person. Instead of seeking better cover, Marcus sprinted directly toward the hegemony heavy unit, his plasma rifle blazing. The machine's weapons tracked him, but he was too close now for its primary guns to depress low enough. Marcus rolled under its bulk and triggered his last shaped charge directly against its power core. The explosion lifted him off his feet and sent him tumbling across the rubble-strewn ground. His environmental suit was breached in 3 places, emergency sealant barely keeping the thin atmosphere from leaking out. But the heavy unit was down, its burning wreckage scattered across the excavation site. Marcus dragged himself to the gate's control interface. As more hegemony reinforcements advanced through the smoke, his hands were shaking now, blood loss, exhaustion, and stimulant crash all taking their toll. But the controls were finally responding, dimensional matrices aligning with mathematical precision. The gate began to open. Reality tore like fabric, revealing a swirling vortex of impossible colors. Through the dimensional breach, Marcus could see stars, familiar constellations, the view from Earth's southern hemisphere. Home was on the other side of that tier in space-time, just waiting for him to establish a stable connection. But the hegemony dreadnoughts were powering up their main weapons, preparing to destroy the gate before he could complete the link. Marcus had perhaps 60 seconds before those massive guns turned him and the ancient artifact into superheated plasma. 60 seconds to warn Earth about the coming invasion. He began composing his transmission, knowing it would probably be his last. The dimensional gate erupted with blinding light as reality folded in on itself. Through the swirling vortex, Marcus could see Earth's orbital defense platforms, massive structures bristling with weapons that had once seemed invincible. Now they looked pathetically inadequate against what was coming. His transmission burst through the dimensional breach with the force of desperation. Earth Defense Command, this is Marcus Corvain. Colonial Fleet, the hegemony is coming. 3 dreadnoughts, possibly more in the main fleet. They've conquered everything between here and Seoul. You have maybe 6 hours before the first orbital bombardment struck the gate directly. The ancient structure absorbed most of the energy, its crystalline matrix flaring with protective barriers that had endured for millennia. But Marcus felt the shock wave through his bones, and his instruments showed dangerous fluctuations in the dimensional matrix. Through his external cameras, he watched the full hegemony assault force advance. Not dozens, now hundreds of mechanical soldiers moving in perfect formation across the devastated landscape. Heavy assault units thundered forward on massive treads, their weapons already charging. Artillery platforms established firing positions on the surrounding ridges, their barrels swiveling toward the gate with mechanical precision. But Earth had heard his warning. The response came through the dimensional breach like a thunderclap. Admiral Garadek's voice, stronger than he'd heard it in months. Marcus, this is Admiral Garadek, Earth Defense Command. We're reading your transmission and tracking the gate signature. Hold your position. We're sending reinforcements. Reinforcements? Through a dimensional gate that was barely stable enough to carry radio signals, Marcus started to protest, then stopped as something massive began emerging from the vortex. The TFS Retribution materialized through the dimensional breach like a metal leviathan. Rising from the depths, Marcus had served aboard her sister ships kilometer-long dreadnoughts armed with fusion torpedoes and plasma cannons that could crack continents. But this one was different. Her hull bore scorch marks from recent battle, and her weapons were already trained on the advancing hegemony forces. This is Captain Aldrich Voss, TFS Retribution. The comm crackled with static from the dimensional interference. We've got visual on hostiles. All hands, battle stations, weapons free. The Retribution's opening salvo was devastating. Fusion torpedoes streaked across the battlefield, each one capable of leveling a city block. They struck the hegemony formation like hammers of God, vaporizing dozens of mechanical soldiers in brilliant flashes of nuclear fire. But the aliens adapted quickly, their remaining forces scattering and returning fire with weapons that could punch through starship armor. More Earth ships began emerging through the gate, destroyers, cruisers, even a carrier disgorging squadrons of fighters. But the dimensional breach was unstable, fluctuating wildly as Nexus Prime's core destabilized further. Some ships materialized intact, others arrived as clouds of superheated debris, their atoms scattered across multiple dimensions. Marcus watched the hegemony orbital dreadnoughts reposition themselves for a killing shot. Their main weapons, particle accelerators kilometers long, were charging with energy that made his instruments shriek warnings. A single salvo from those monsters would obliterate the gate and everything within a 100-kilometer radius. All Earth vessels, priority target. He broadcast. Hegemony dreadnoughts preparing orbital bombardment. If they destroy the gate, you're trapped here. Captain Voss understood immediately. The Retribution's engines flared as she broke orbit, climbing toward the hegemony vessels with her weapons blazing. Her escorts followed a dozen Earth warships against 3 alien dreadnoughts that outgunned them 10-1. The space battle was brutal and short. Hegemony weapons tore through Earth's formations like a scythe through wheat. Marcus watched the destroyer Valiant die in a cascade of fusion fire, her hull split open and bleeding atmosphere. The cruiser Defiance lasted longer, her armor absorbing punishment that would have vaporized lesser vessels before a direct hit from a hegemony particle beam turned her into an expanding cloud of plasma. But the Earth ships kept coming. More Vessels emerged through the gate, some intact, some damaged, all of them firing as soon as their weapons could acquire targets. Marcus realized this wasn't just a rescue mission. Earth was committing everything they had, using his gate as a staging point for a last desperate counterattack. On the ground, the battle had devolved into savage close combat. Hegemony soldiers were advancing through the rubble, their mechanical forms scuttling over obstacles that would stop conventional troops. But Earth's ground forces had come through the gate as well, Marines in powered armor, their weapons designed specifically for fighting synthetic enemies. Marcus found himself in the middle of a firefight that would have seemed impossible an hour ago. Earth soldiers and alien machines tearing each other apart among the ruins of his excavation site, while overhead, starships dueled with weapons that turned night into day. A hegemony soldier rounded the gate's base, his optical sensors tracking toward Marcus's position. He didn't have time to raise his rifle before Staff Sergeant Reyes appeared beside Marcus. As he worked frantically to stabilize the gate's dimensional matrix, her powered armor was scarred and smoking, but her eyes were sharp with determination. "Can you keep the portal open long enough for evacuation?" she asked. Marcus checked his readings. The gate's crystalline structure was cracking under the immense stresses. Hairline fractures spreading through its base like spider webs. Maybe 15 minutes. After that, the whole thing collapses and takes half the planet with it. Then we'd better move fast. The evacuation proceeded with desperate efficiency. Earth's transports descended through the plasma-scorched atmosphere, their hulls glowing cherry red as they fought through the electromagnetic interference. Marines and surviving technical personnel were loaded aboard with military precision. But Marcus knew they wouldn't get everyone out in time. He made a decision that surprised himself. Instead of boarding the first available transport, he remained at the gate's control interface, using every trick he knew to keep the dimensional matrix stable. Each adjustment bought them precious seconds, but he could feel the ancient structure dying around him. "Corvain, get on the transport." Captain Voss's voice crackled through his calm. "That's an order." "Negative, Captain. Someone needs to maintain the gate until the last ship is through. If it collapses prematurely, you'll lose half the fleet." There was a long pause. "Understood. We'll hold position as long as possible." Marcus smiled grimly as he watched the last hegemony survivors retreat from the surface. The aliens had learned a hard lesson about human determination, but he suspected they would be back with better strategies and more ships. This victory was temporary, a single battle in a war that would span decades. But for now, it was enough. The final transport lifted off just as Nexus Prime's crust began its catastrophic collapse. Marcus felt the ground buckle beneath his feet as tectonic forces that had been building for months finally exceeded the planet's structural limits. Lava fountains erupted across the excavation site, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The dimensional gate gave one final pulse of energy before its matrix collapsed completely. The portal to Earth winked out, leaving Marcus alone on a dying world with the wreckage of an ancient civilization scattered around him. But he wasn't afraid. Through his comm system, he could hear the chatter of Earth's fleet as they regrouped. In orbit, the hegemony had been driven off, their planet crackers destroyed, their invasion fleet crippled. More importantly, Earth now knew what was coming and had time to prepare. Marcus had given them that time. A repair technician with jury-rigged equipment and stubborn human determination had opened a path home and warned his people of the threat approaching from the darkness between stars. His environmental suit was failing now, the seals compromised by battle damage and the intense heat from the planetary collapse. But as consciousness faded, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: satisfaction. He completed the most important repair job of his career. He'd fixed humanity's future. Above Nexus Prime's dying atmosphere, Admiral Garrett stood on the Retribution's bridge and watched the planet tear itself apart. The dimensional gate was gone, along with the man who built it. But the intelligence they gathered would change everything. Earth now knew the hegemony's capabilities, their tactics, their weaknesses, and humans had always been fast learners. "Set course for Earth," she ordered. "Maximum acceleration. We have a war to prepare for." The fleet turned toward home, carrying with them the most valuable cargo in human history: advance warning of an alien invasion, and proof that even the most overwhelming odds could be overcome. With ingenuity, desperation, and the peculiar human refusal to accept defeat. Behind them, Nexus Prime collapsed into its own gravity well, taking with it the last traces of an ancient gate and the man who dared to repair it. But Marcus Corvain's legacy lived on in the saved fleet, the warned homeworld, and the knowledge that when humanity was pushed to the wall, they pushed back. The Thought Eaters had wanted to assimilate human efficiency and eliminate human chaos. Instead, they learned that human chaos was exactly what made humanity dangerous. 3 months later, when the hegemony's main invasion fleet arrived at Earth's outer defenses, they found not the helpless colony worlds they conquered before, but a fortress bristling with weapons and defended by people who knew exactly what they were fighting. For the real war was just beginning, but thanks to a repair technician on a forgotten world, humanity would be ready. And in the depths of space, where quantum echoes carried the memory of dimensional gates and impossible repairs, Marcus Corvain's last transmission continued to propagate outward a message that would reach other human colonies, other survivors, other desperate souls fighting against the darkness. The message was simple: never give up, never surrender, and when all else fails, remember that humans don't fight fair, we fight to win. Ellen Reyes, a woman he'd never met, but whose uniform bore the Earth Defense Force insignia, put 3 plasma bolts through the machine's central processor. "You the tech who opened this thing," she shouted over the weapon fire. "That's me," Marcus replied, checking the gate's power levels, still stable, but the dimensional matrix was fluctuating dangerously. "Good work. Now help us hold it." The battle raged with inhuman intensity. Hegemony forces threw themselves against Earth's defensive positions with mechanical determination, while human soldiers responded with the savage ingenuity that had carried their species across the galaxy. The casualties were horrific on both sides: twisted metal and broken bodies scattered across the battlefield like discarded toys. But slowly, impossibly, the tide was turning. Earth's forces were gaining ground, pushing the hegemony back through sheer bloody-minded determination. Marcus allowed himself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to win this. Then the hegemony revealed their true strategy. The hegemony's final gambit revealed itself as 3 more dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls black as the void between stars. Marcus's sensors screamed warnings as they detected the new arrivals, not just additional firepower, but something far worse. These vessels were different, their energy signatures unlike anything in the hegemony's standard fleet. "Marcus, this is Admiral Garridic." The transmission crackled through the dimensional interference. "We're reading massive energy spikes from those new hostiles. What are we looking at?" Marcus ran the sensor readings through his jury-rigged analysis system, and the results made his blood freeze. "They're not warships, Admiral. They're planet crackers. The hegemony isn't trying to capture the gate, they're going to destroy Nexus Prime with us on it." The planet crackers began their targeting sequence. Weapons designed to shatter worlds, charging with energy that bent space-time around their hulls. Marcus realized with sick certainty that they had perhaps 10 minutes before Nexus Prime became an expanding cloud of radioactive debris, but the Earth fleet wasn't giving up. Captain Voss pushed the Retribution into a suicidal charge against the lead planet cracker, her weapons blazing at point-blank range. The massive Earth dreadnought hammered the alien vessel with everything she had: fusion torpedoes, plasma cannons, kinetic penetrators moving at significant fractions of light speed. The planet cracker's hull cracked under the assault, atmosphere venting from multiple breaches. But its weapons were still charging, and Marcus could see the telltale energy buildup that preceded planetary annihilation. "All vessels, ramming speed." Captain Voss's voice rang across the comm channels. "We're not letting these bastards take the gate." What followed was the most desperate space battle in human history. Earth ships threw themselves against the hegemony planet crackers with suicidal fury, ramming attacks and close-range weapon exchanges that turned the space around Nexus Prime into a graveyard of twisted metal. The destroyer Indomitable rammed straight into a planet cracker's weapon ray, her fusion reactor detonating in a blast that crippled the alien vessel, but vaporized her crew instantly. On the ground, the situation was equally desperate. Hegemony forces were making a final push toward the gate, throwing everything they had at Earth's defensive positions. Marcus found himself fighting alongside Marines he'd never met, their powered armor scarred by weapons fire as they held the line against mechanical soldiers that felt no fear, no pain, no mercy. Staff Sergeant Reyes appeared beside him, her plasma rifle smoking from overuse. "Gate status," she shouted over the chaos. "Stable for now," Marcus replied, ducking as a hegemony energy beam scorched the air above his head. "But if those planet crackers fire, we're all dead. Then we stop them. How? We're ground forces. They're in orbit. Reyes grinned with savage humor. You built this gate, right? You understand how it works. Marcus nodded, uncertain where she was going with this. Then tell me what happens if we overload it. The idea hit Marcus like a physical blow. Overload the gate while it was connected to Earth. The dimensional feedback would be catastrophic, but it might also create a gravitational anomaly, powerful enough to disrupt the planet cracker's targeting systems. It could work, he admitted, but the feedback pulse would probably kill everyone on this side of the gate. Better than letting them crack the planet with Earth's fleet still coming through. Marcus looked around the battlefield, at the Earth soldiers dying to hold positions they'd never seen before today, fighting for a gate they barely understood. Because a repair technician had asked for help, these people deserved better than a suicidal last stand. But sometimes, better wasn't an option. I need 3 minutes to reconfigure the power matrix, he said. Reyes nodded grimly. You'll have them. The final stand began with inhuman fury. Earth's remaining forces formed a tight perimeter around the gate, their weapons creating an overlapping field of fire that turned the approaching hegemony soldiers into scrap metal. But there were too many aliens, and they kept coming with mechanical persistence. Marcus worked frantically at the gate's control interface, his hands flying over crystalline surfaces that responded to his touch with alien precision. The ancient artifacts' power systems were incredibly sophisticated, but he was asking them to do something they were never designed for: channel enough energy to tear a hole in space-time itself. 2 minutes, he shouted. A hegemony heavy assault unit broke through the defensive line, its weapons tracking toward Marcus's position. 3 Marines threw themselves into its path, their powered armor no match for its plasma cannons, but buying precious seconds with their lives. Marcus felt their deaths like physical blows, but he kept working. The gate's power matrix was responding, energy levels climbing beyond any safe threshold. Deep beneath Nexus Prime's surface, the planet's core was destabilizing catastrophically, but Marcus was drawing every erg of power he could access. The dimensional matrix was screaming warnings that he ignored: feedback loops, quantum instabilities, probability cascades that threatened to unmake local spacetime. 1 minute, in orbit, the planet crackers had finally achieved target lock. Marcus could see their weapons charging on his external sensors, energy signatures building toward the critical threshold. When those weapons fired, Nexus Prime would simply cease to exist. But the gate was ready. Marcus's finger hovered over the final control, the one that would overload every system he'd spent months repairing. The dimensional feedback would be visible from neighboring star systems, a gravitational anomaly that would disrupt everything within 100 light years. It might also give Earth the tactical advantage they needed to win this war. Do it, Reyes said quietly beside him. Marcus pressed the control. The dimensional overload began as a whisper in the quantum foam and became a roar that shook the foundations of reality. Marcus felt the gate's power matrix surge beyond all safety limits, drawing energy from Nexus Prime's dying core with violent hunger. The ancient crystalline structure blazed with light that hurt to look at directly, patterns of force racing through its matrix faster than thought. The feedback pulse erupted through the dimensional breach like the birth cry of a new universe. Space-time itself buckled around the gate, gravity waves racing outward at the speed of causality. Marcus watched his instruments register readings that shouldn't exist: energy densities that violated conservation laws, quantum fluctuations that threatened to unmake matter itself die in orbit. The hegemony planet crackers were caught in the gravitational maelstrom. Their precisely calibrated weapon systems, designed to crack worlds with surgical precision, couldn't compensate for the impossible tidal forces washing over them. Targeting computers failed as space itself became unreliable, distance and time flowing like water around the dimensional anomaly, but the Earth fleet was ready for it. Admiral Garridick had positioned her remaining vessels in a carefully calculated formation, using the planet cracker's own mass to shield them from the worst of the gravitational distortion. As the hegemony ship struggled to regain targeting lock, Earth's forces struck with coordinated precision. The TFS Retribution, her hull scarred by battle, but her weapons still functional, put a full spread of fusion torpedoes into the lead planet cracker's reactor core. The alien vessel died in a cascade of antimatter fire that lit up Nexus Prime's sky like a second sun. The explosion set off a chain reaction that crippled the second planet cracker and sent the third tumbling out of control. On the ground, the gravitational pulse had equally devastating effects. On the hegemony ground forces, They're mechanical soldiers, dependent on precise sensor networks and coordinated command systems, found themselves blind and deaf as electromagnetic interference from the dimensional breach scrambled their communications. Earth's Marines, trained to fight in chaos and confusion, pressed their advantage with savage efficiency. Marcus watched the battle turn in real time through his failing sensor network. The dimensional overload was consuming the gate's control systems, but he could see enough to know they were winning. Hegemony forces were retreating toward their landing zones, their coordinated assault dissolving into scattered groups of confused machines. But victory came at a terrible price. The dimensional feedback was killing Nexus Prime. The planet's core had finally destabilized beyond any hope of recovery, and massive tectonic shifts were beginning along every major fault line. Marcus's geological scanners showed magma plumes breaking through the crust, while the electromagnetic pulse from the gate was stripping away the planet's atmosphere. Invisible streamers, all Earth forces, immediate evacuation. Admiral Garrideck's voice cut through the chaos. Nexus Prime is going critical. We have maybe 20 minutes before total crustal collapse. The evacuation began with military precision. Surviving Marines fell back to designated pickup points, while Earth's remaining ships descended through the chaotic atmosphere. But the dimensional gate was still active, its matrix locked in an overload cycle that Marcus couldn't stop. The portal to Earth remained open, but it was growing increasingly unstable as the planet died around it. Staff Sergeant